Amidst the bustling streets of the city, a man in a faded hoodie and old sneakers blended into the crowd, his face hidden by the shadow of his hood. No one paid him any mind, but inside, his mind raced with thoughts of what was about to unfold. The people around him couldn't know, but today, he would expose a secret that would rock their world to its core. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything could come crashing down. The question is, would anyone see it coming? Stay tuned, because tomorrow we'll dive deeper into this mystery, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Subscribe and hit the bell for the next chapter. It's going to be even more thrilling and full of twists. It was a quiet Monday morning at the prestigious tech company, Vortex Innovations. The office hummed with the usual energy. Employees dressed in crisp suits, sitting in sleek workstations, typing away with an air of calculated professionalism. The company was known for its cutting-edge technology and elite culture, where appearances mattered almost as much as performance. It was a world where the rich and powerful gathered, basking in the glow of success. And everyone knew that the most powerful figure in the room was Mason Gray, the CEO. Mason had built Vortex Innovations from the ground up, turning it into a billion-dollar empire. He was confident, polished, and proud of his tailored suits and the influence they represented. To him, status wasn't just important, it was everything. His success wasn't just a badge of honor, it was a shield he used to protect himself from anyone who didn't quite measure up. And in Mason's world, people like Keanu Reeves didn't belong. When the news broke that Keanu Reeves would be making a surprise appearance at the company's annual charity gala, Mason was quick to dismiss it with a sarcastic smile. He'd seen Keanu's movies, of course. The actor was beloved by many, admired for his kindness, humility, and talent. But in Mason's mind, Keanu was the epitome of what was wrong with the world, someone who was rich and famous, but who didn't know how to dress the part. Keanu's humble, casual style, his well-worn jeans, simple t-shirts, and scuffed shoes, seemed to Mason like a mockery of the polished world he'd worked so hard to build. "Can you believe Keanu Reeves is attending this gala?" Mason scoffed one afternoon, tossing a magazine across his desk as his employees gathered for a meeting. "I mean, look at the guy. Doesn't even know how to wear a decent suit. Maybe he should have a master class in how to dress like a professional." Laughter rippled through the room. The employees, eager to stay in Mason's good graces, chuckled along, even though they were uncomfortable. They all knew that in Mason's eyes, appearance was everything, and if Keanu's wardrobe didn't match the power suits and polished shoes of the corporate world, it was something to be mocked. But what Mason didn't know, what none of the employees knew, was that Keanu wasn't just attending the gala as a guest. He was there for a bigger purpose. The night of the gala arrived. The grand ballroom at Vortex Innovations was drenched in golden lights, the soft clinking of champagne glasses creating a symphony of luxury. Keanu Reeves walked in, dressed in his signature understated style, a black t-shirt, a simple leather jacket, and jeans. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Mason, standing at the front of the room, couldn't help but feel a little irritated when he saw Keanu enter. He turned to his executive assistant with a mock whisper, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Is this a charity event, or a cosplay convention?" Keanu smiled politely at the small crowd gathered around him, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. Despite the glaring contrast between his style and the other guests, who were decked out in designer tuxedos and gowns, he exuded an effortless charm that left people in awe. It was clear. Keanu's reputation wasn't built on the clothes he wore. It was built on his generosity, his humility, his authenticity. But Mason couldn't let it go. As Keanu passed by him to speak with some other guests, Mason, in his usual arrogant manner, couldn't help himself. He called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "Hey, Keanu!" Mason said, loud enough for those around him to hear. "I didn't know they were letting actors crash corporate events these days. Maybe you should go find a suit that actually fits in here." The room fell silent. The laughter that had echoed before vanished. Every eye turned to Keanu, whose calm expression never faltered. He didn't flinch, didn't retort. He just looked at Mason and, with a slight tilt of his head, said softly, "I think the problem isn't the suit, Mason. It's the way you see people." Mason smirked, feeling satisfied that he'd put the actor in his place. But as the evening wore on, a ripple of unease began to spread through the room. Keanu's words had lingered in the air, and the employees who had once followed Mason's lead began to look at him with a new perspective, one that was shaped by the quiet dignity Keanu had shown in the face of mockery. The next morning, the ripple became a wave. Mason sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports, when he received an unexpected email. The subject line was simple: "I'm resigning." He opened it, and his eyes widened as he read. It was from Sarah, the head of marketing, someone he trusted implicitly. She had been with Vortex Innovations for over a decade, yet she was stepping down. "I can no longer be a part of this company," the email began. "After witnessing your treatment of Keanu last night, I realized that the values I once believed in, honesty, respect, kindness, have no place in Vortex anymore. I can no longer work under a leader who thinks it's acceptable to mock someone for their appearance. The company has lost its way." Mason sat back, stunned, his hands frozen over the keyboard. This wasn't a one-off. Within the hour, another resignation came through. And then another. It didn't stop until half of the leadership team had walked out, each with the same sentiment: that they could no longer work in an environment that demeaned others based on superficial judgments. Word of the mass resignation spread quickly, and the employees who remained in the building felt a shift in the atmosphere. Mason had been successful, yes, but success had come at the cost of respect. His arrogance had created an environment of fear, where only those who played by his rules were valued, and everyone else was disposable. The board of directors, watching this fallout unfold, had no choice but to intervene. The very next day, they called Mason into a meeting. "Mason," the chairman said, his voice grave, "we've received numerous complaints, and frankly, the company's reputation is on the line. Your actions last night were not only inappropriate, but they've led to a mass exodus of key employees. We can't afford to let this continue." Mason's arrogance faltered for the first time in years. He tried to defend himself, but the board was firm. He was out. Within days, Keanu Reeves, the very person Mason had mocked, was invited by the board to take over the company. Keanu, ever humble, was initially hesitant. But as he looked around at the board members, who had all seen the same thing, the stark contrast between Mason's behavior and Keanu's character, he realized this was his chance to lead by example. The moment Keanu stepped into the CEO position, the transformation began. His first act? Calling a company-wide meeting and speaking directly to the employees. "I believe success doesn't come from tearing others down," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "It comes from lifting each other up. This company will not thrive because of what we own or wear, but because of how we treat one another. I want you to know that every single person here has value, regardless of their title or appearance. We are more than what we project on the outside." Keanu's leadership was a breath of fresh air. Under his guidance, the company grew even more successful, but this time, the growth was not just measured in dollars. It was measured in the respect that was restored, the employees who felt valued, and the culture that shifted from elitism to inclusivity. Mason, left behind with his pride and his judgmental views, watched from afar as Keanu Reeves turned the company around. In the end, Keanu didn't just take over a company, he took over the hearts of the people who worked there. And Mason? He was left to reflect on the bitter truth: true success is not about wealth or appearance, but the legacy we leave in the way we treat others. As the weeks passed, the transformation at Vortex Innovations was nothing short of remarkable. The energy in the office was palpable, and it wasn't just because the company was turning record profits. No, it was the spirit that had changed. People smiled at each other in the hallways, exchanged ideas in meetings, and supported one another's growth. It was a company where respect wasn't earned based on appearances or titles. It was a company where respect was simply given, as it should be. Keanu's leadership was quiet yet firm. He didn't come in with grandiose speeches or flashy initiatives. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. In his first month, he set up open-door sessions with employees from all levels, junior assistants, mid-level managers, even the janitors, something Mason had never once done. Every voice was heard. No one was dismissed, no matter their role. And Keanu made it clear that his door was always open, not just for the important people, but for anyone who had something to say. One afternoon, Keanu was sitting in a conference room with his leadership team, when Jenna, a former executive who had resigned with the wave of employees, stopped by unexpectedly. She had been one of the first to leave when Mason's behavior became intolerable. "I've been watching what's been happening here, Keanu," Jenna said with a thoughtful look. "And I have to admit, I didn't think it was going to work. I didn't think you could bring this company back after, well, everything that happened. But seeing the changes, seeing how the employees are speaking out now, the way they feel heard, it's incredible. I'm honestly surprised, in the best way." Keanu smiled, but there was a sadness behind his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of the cost. "It's not just about fixing the company's reputation, Jenna. It's about fixing the environment we create for people. And that takes time. Trust. Consistency. I know, but still, people are happy to come to work again," she said, her voice laced with amazement. "You've brought something back that was missing, something Mason could never grasp." Keanu leaned back in his chair. "It's not about me," he replied simply. "It's about making sure that everyone feels valued, regardless of their paycheck or what they wear. What they look like, how they talk, it doesn't matter. I don't want to be the kind of CEO who only sees dollar signs. I want to see the people behind the numbers." Jenna's eyes softened. She'd known Mason long enough to understand what Keanu meant, what Mason had lacked. She had worked under Mason's reign, where profits came before people, where appearances were the only thing that truly mattered. There was no room for authenticity, only for those who could play the game and fit the mold. It was a culture that slowly ate away at the soul of the company. And it was Keanu's gentle but resolute leadership that had begun to repair it, one conversation, one gesture, one moment at a time. As months went by, Mason found himself increasingly irrelevant in the world he had once dominated. He had tried to rebuild his own empire, investing in smaller tech startups, trying to replicate the high-profile success he had once enjoyed, but nothing seemed to stick. His former colleagues, those he had once admired and worked alongside, no longer responded to his calls. The boardrooms he entered were filled with skepticism, not respect. His name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now whispered in circles of failure. In contrast, Keanu's influence spread beyond the walls of Vortex Innovations. Media outlets were quick to praise him for his leadership style, which contrasted sharply with Mason's cold, calculating approach. It wasn't just the business world that admired Keanu, it was people everywhere. He had become a symbol of kindness, humility, and the power of treating people well. A simple tweet from Keanu could send ripples of inspiration across social media, reminding people that success wasn't about the money in your bank account, but the people you uplift along the way. One afternoon, Keanu sat in his office overlooking the city, reflecting on everything that had changed. He was interrupted by a knock at the door. "Mr. Reeves, you have a visitor," his assistant said, standing in the doorway with a look of curiosity on her face. Keanu looked up. "Who is it?" The assistant hesitated. "It's Mason Gray." The name hung in the air like a weight. Keanu had not heard from Mason since the night of the gala. He had assumed the former CEO had moved on, fading into the background like so many other people who couldn't adapt to the shift in corporate culture. "Send him in," Keanu said, his voice calm but curious. Mason stepped in slowly, his usually sharp appearance now marred by a certain weariness. He no longer wore the cocky grin that had once been his trademark. His posture, once filled with confidence, was now slouched, his eyes betraying the weight of failure he had been carrying. Keanu gestured to the seat in front of his desk. "Please, have a seat." Mason hesitated, glancing around the room before sitting down. His eyes never met Keanu's at first. For a long moment, there was only silence. I just came to apologize, Mason finally said, his voice quieter than usual. I treated you terribly that night. And to be honest, I never thought I'd be in this position. I've lost everything, Keanu. The company, the respect, the people who worked for me. You were right. The problem wasn't the suit, it was me. Keanu looked at Mason, his expression unreadable. But inside, he felt a strange sense of understanding. I know it must be hard to admit, Keanu said softly. I don't want anything from you. I didn't do this to prove a point. I did it because I believe people deserve better, especially the ones who work hard without expecting anything in return. Mason swallowed hard, a bitter lump in his throat. I never understood that, he admitted. I thought success came from power. I thought appearances were everything. But I see now. I see what you've built here. It's not just about what's on the outside. It's about trust. About respect. Keanu nodded, his eyes steady. It's never too late to change, Mason. But you have to be willing to put the ego down. You have to be willing to see people, not as tools to get ahead, but as equals. Mason sat there, the weight of Keanu's words sinking in. I don't know if I can fix what I've done. I don't know if I can ever rebuild what I lost. You don't need to rebuild anything, Keanu replied quietly. You just need to learn to build a new way of doing things. And that starts with how you see people. It starts with respect. Mason sat in silence for a long time, the realization slowly sinking in. He had spent his life chasing the wrong things. And now, he was left to reckon with it all. The company he had once ruled had been transformed, by a man who had nothing to prove except that decency and respect were the true measures of success. As Mason stood to leave, Keanu offered him one final piece of advice. Don't let this be the end of your story. Let it be the beginning of a new chapter. One that you can be proud of. Mason looked up at Keanu, his eyes filled with something rare, genuine gratitude. Thank you, Keanu. I won't forget this. And as Mason walked out of the office, Keanu watched him go. It was clear that, no matter what happened next, Mason had learned the hardest lesson of all, that respect and kindness are the true currencies of life, and no amount of money or success can ever replace them. The legacy of Vortex Innovations would no longer be defined by its revenue, its technology, or even its products. It would be defined by the people who work there, and the values they chose to live by. Keanu had led them to this place, and in doing so, he had shown that true leadership was not about power or prestige, but about lifting others up. And as for Mason, his journey had just begun, but for the first time, he was ready to walk it with humility, not ego. Mason's departure from Keanu's office was quiet, but inside, the turmoil was far from silent. As he walked through the halls of Vortex Innovations for what might be the last time, he couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. The once sterile, almost soulless environment of the company had transformed into something warm, something human. He had dismissed it as soft when Keanu first took over, saw it as a passing trend, but now, it felt solid, like a foundation of integrity that would last far beyond the next financial quarter. He stepped outside, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. The world felt different somehow. The hustle of the city didn't seem as frantic, as urgent as it once did. He thought about the employees who had left when he had treated them like tools, people like Jenna who had seen the company for what it truly was, a place that could have been better, if only it had been led with respect and decency. And now, under Keanu's guidance, those same people had returned, not for the paycheck, but because they believed in what the company was becoming. In that moment, Mason understood. He wasn't just losing a company. He was losing the trust of the people who had made it what it was in the first place. The things that mattered, real connection, shared vision, and respect, were the very things he had ignored. Months passed. Mason tried to reinvent himself in the quiet corners of his life, starting small projects, trying to rebuild his reputation. But every step felt heavier than the last. The harsh truth was that there was no quick way to undo the damage he'd done. It wasn't just his career on the line, it was his soul. Meanwhile, Keanu's Vortex innovations continued to thrive, not just in profits, but in its impact. Employees were now finding themselves thriving in ways that went beyond traditional success. The company had become a sanctuary for creativity, for innovation, and for integrity. Keanu didn't micromanage. He empowered people to take ownership of their roles, trusting them in ways Mason never had. As Keanu had said in his first meeting with the leadership team, leadership isn't about standing at the top of the pyramid. It's about building the pyramid with everyone in it, lifting each other up. And it showed in every corner of the company. One evening, after another successful product launch, Keanu stood at the edge of the rooftop garden of the Vortex building. The city lights twinkled below him, but his thoughts weren't on the grandeur of the moment. He wasn't thinking about his success. He was thinking about the employees, his people, who were finally getting to enjoy the fruits of an environment built on respect, kindness, and genuine care for each other. Jenna, now head of the innovation department, had been instrumental in bringing the newest project to life, a sustainable technology that would revolutionize the way products were made and disposed of. The launch had been a success, not because of the technology itself, although it was groundbreaking, but because of the team behind it, every single person who had poured their heart into it. Keanu had witnessed them grow, not just as professionals but as people who truly valued each other. Just then, Jenna approached him on the rooftop, a proud smile on her face. "Keanu, we did it," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction. "The project is officially going global. And it's all because the team feels like they belong. They feel like they matter." Keanu turned to her, a soft smile touching his lips. "It's because they do, Jenna. Every person in this company matters. And that's the key to anything great." Months later, Mason, once a titan of industry, now worked at a small non-profit organization. It wasn't flashy. It didn't promise massive returns. But it was where he could give back in ways he hadn't considered before. He was learning, slowly, that real wealth wasn't about stock prices or impressing others. It was about the impact you had on the people around you, and how you treated them. One day, Mason received an email. It was from Jenna, the one person who had stayed in touch after the storm. The subject line simply read, "Keanu would like to meet." Mason felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't spoken to Keanu since that day in the office. He had assumed their worlds would never cross again. But here it was, a chance for closure. He was scared, though. Scared of facing the man who had succeeded where he had failed. The meeting was set. Mason walked into the cafe, the familiar jolt of anxiety shooting through him as he spotted Keanu at a table in the corner, casually sipping a coffee. There was no entourage, no assistants hovering around. Just Keanu, looking as effortlessly kind as ever. Keanu looked up and smiled when he saw Mason approach. "It's good to see you, Mason." Mason sat down, his hands trembling slightly. "Keanu, I didn't expect this. You didn't expect me." But more importantly, the people thrived. And in the end, that was what Keanu had always wanted. A culture where kindness and respect were the foundation for everything. If this story touched your heart, we've got many more that will do the same. Click the screen to discover more tales of hope, compassion, and resilience that will inspire you.